So how we're going to work the budget recommendations from the General Government Budget Committee and also from the Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committee is that we'll go ahead and have the recommendations reviewed by the committee today, and then on Monday morning when we convene, then we'll actually have a vote to pass those budgets out. First item is, are there any bill introductions this morning? Representative Owens.
Yes, thank you. I do have 22 RS 2845, which is relating to reimbursement rates of our nursing homes, requiring those rates to be based on actual cost. I would request that be introduced.
Is there any objection to the bill introduction? Seeing none, the bill is introduced.
Thank you.
Any further bill introductions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll pass over the minutes to be approved, and we'll do that on Monday morning for the meetings of January 25th and January 26th. And so we'll move on to actually our first bill hearing of the year, and that is in regards to House Bill 2548, which would be implementing additional reporting requirements for informational technology projects and state agencies and requiring additional information technology security training and status reports. So I'll now turn it over to Natalie Scott, the Assistant Revisor for the Revisor of Statutes. Natalie?
Thank you, Chairman Waymaster. Good morning, committee. I am Natalie Scott. I'm the assistant revisor assigned to the Joint Committee on Information Technology. So I'm going to walk you through this bill today. House Bill 2548 implements additional reporting requirements for informational technology projects and state agencies and requires additional information technology security training and status reports. Section 1 amends KSA 462102. That's the statute that creates the Joint Committee on Information Technology. The bill would require the Joint Committee to advise and consult on all state agency information technology projects that pose a significant business risk as determined by Information Technology Council, which I'll refer to as ITEC policies. Section 2 amends KSA 757201. It would make some changes to the definitions used throughout the information technology sections. The definition for an information technology project would be defined and limited duration that implements, affects a change in, or presents a risk to process, service, security, systems, records, data, human resources, or architecture. Additionally, that definition would include a definition of a project change or overrun, which would increase from what it is currently at $1 million or 10% to a threshold that would be established by ITEC policies. The bill would also add a definition of business risk to be used throughout those statutes. Sections 3, 4, and 5 of the bill would make changes to the reporting requirements for the chief information technology officers of each branch of government. The bill would make those reporting requirements for all 3 of those CTOs to report their quarterly reports to the Joint Committee on Information Technology. And they would have to report on all of those projects instead of just the current ones that they have to report on under statute now. Section 6 of the bill would make changes to the reporting requirements for agencies for their information technology projects. It would require an agency to submit a report for a project that includes documentation with a financial plan showing proposed source of funding with the cost estimates, and those would have to be consistent with the policies that are adopted by ITEC. Additionally, the bill would require that prior to the release of any request for proposal, all those specifications for bids or proposals related to an approved information technology project would be reviewed by the appropriate CTO for that agency. And then projects that required CTO approval would also require the CTO's written approval on specifications for bid and proposals. The state agency involved in that project would be required to submit the project along with the project plan, the architecture, the cost-benefit analysis to their CTO, and then their CTO would make that project plan summary available to the Joint Committee on Information Technology. The state agency would not be allowed to approve the release of any request for proposal or other bid for a high-risk information technology project without first having advised and consulted with the Joint Committee on Information Technology. The agency would be deemed to have advised and consulted if fewer than 2 members of the Joint Committee make a request for a meeting related to reviewing that information technology project, or that meeting is scheduled but doesn't occur within 2 calendar weeks. Section 7 of the bill amends KSA 7210 and concerns the submission of reports. It would require those 3-year plans to be submitted by November 1st instead of October 1st, as it is in current law. Section 8 amends KSA 757211. Under current law, the head of that agency can authorize a change in an information technology project if it would not result in increased project costs of more than $1 million or 10%. This bill would remove that provision and require the agency head to report all project changes and overruns to JCIT. Sections 9 through 12 make changes to the Kansas Cybersecurity Act. They require cyber security awareness training to be available to all state agencies. The CISO, with input from the Joint Committee on Information Technology and the Joint Committee on Kansas Security, would be required to develop a self-assessment report for agencies to use to submit their assessments on their IT security projects. Those self-assessment reports that are made to the CISO would not be subject to the Open Records Act. Additionally, we add some requirements for the head of all state agencies. They would have to participate in annual agency leadership training, ensure that all information technology login credentials are disabled the same day that an employee leaves, and require all employees with access to information technology receive a minimum of 1 hour of information technology security training per year. I would note that Chairman Hoffman directed me to draft a couple balloons that I think he wants to talk to you about when he testifies on this bill. So we'll go ahead and distribute those so you'll have them in front of you for his discussion, and I can take any questions.
All right, thank you, Natalie. Committee, are there any questions for the reviser? Representative Rogers.
I mean, IT is something that, don't know much about, but this is simply, is this a cleanup or is this to get us, I mean, there's a lot of new language, so why is this came out of the committee or I mean, are there sweeping changes, just what I was able to see, or is this just to kind of keep us in compliant with, you know what I'm getting at?
I think so. Mr. Chairman, Representative Rogers, this bill was put together by the Joint Committee over the interim. They discussed several drafts. We had a first draft. We had some changes made throughout the committee process before they recommended this bill for introduction. There are certainly some substantive changes, but I would say most of the reporting requirement changes are kind of just bringing the statutes in line to the current practice, what happens with reporting. But I know that Alan, our CTO, is here to talk to you about some of the changes that will be made, and I assume someone from the Department of Administration is also here, so they'll be able to answer some more of those questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other further questions for the reviser? All right, see none. Thank you, Natalie. We'll go ahead and turn over to the testimony for House Bill 2548, and the first individual that we have is actually the Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Representative Kyle Hoffman. Representative.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, committee. I had Natalie go ahead and pass out these 2 amendments. I think Alan's going to talk about them a little bit more, but I wanted you guys to go ahead and have them so you could see what we were trying to do. But as a member of the Joint Committee on Information Technology, and then I've been the chairman off and on, as we split back and forth through the House and Senate, it's frustrated me that we have very little oversight of IT projects before they're basically already being worked on. So the RFP's gone out, the vendor has been decided, and then they start, and then we start getting information from them as far as overruns, how they're doing, and comes on a quarterly basis. Well, we've looked at that, and with the Labor's Modernization committee that was put in place. We kind of saw how it worked, and several people on the committee expressed, and it's very bipartisan, actually. I mean, we've worked on this with myself and the Democrat colleagues and the legislature and the administration. We've worked on this to try to come up with a plan that basically mirrors what the building committee is now. So the building committee gets those plans, they talk about it, they look at the issues before an RFP is put out. And so we talked to Secretary Burns-Wallace, and she helped us quite a bit in figuring out a place within the whole system in order to be able to give us that oversight before RFPs are done without slowing down the project too much. And so as Natalie said, it would give JCIT members a 7-day window to look over these projects and decide if we want to have a meeting or not, if 2 or more are asked for it. If you look at my testimony, right now we have over $283 million of active projects. We have 82 million just approved and another 84 projects in the planning stage. So it's not like we're never, I mean, this is a lot of money that we are doing IT projects. It's almost bigger than the buildings anymore, because there's so many of them, they happen so much. And so this will just give us that ability to maybe have a little bit more oversight. The other thing that this bill does, and this is actually 3 bills put together. So there were 2 Senate bills that were introduced last year and then 1 House bill. We heard the House bill here last year, and it really wasn't ready. There was quite a few things that just it didn't work the way we thought it was going to. And so we took the Senate bill, which was a cybersecurity bill, and the other Senate bill was a bill that would change the matrix of how these are reported. So right now, any project that is $250,000 or more is reported to JCIT on a quarterly basis. Through working with with Secretary Burns-Wallace, the bill that they had last year in the Senate would change that to a risk-based approach. So you could have a project that is only $1 million. I mean, it was only maybe a few $1,000s, but if it's risky, if it touches certain risk points that are a policy that's going to be put together by ITEC, then we would see that. But let's say it's a project over $1 million and it's very simple. There's not anything that seems to be a huge risk. We won't necessarily see that. So it's going to change the dynamics a little bit of the projects that we see. We may see more, we may see less, but I think we'll probably see a few more, because some of those smaller projects that could be risky. So you could have a project that actually touches several different areas, and it may not be very expensive, but if it's risky because it touches a lot of different agencies or different systems. So that's one of the things that's taken us a while to kind of work that out. And then the last bill was the cybersecurity, changing some of the cybersecurity things. We get cybersecurity reports all the time. So does legislative post audit. And one of the things that we found is that training really needs to be pushed, and it needs to be pushed from the top down. So it needs to be a focus of the secretary, or at least the high up in those agencies. So so that's is that mine? Oh my goodness.
Time's up.
I'm gonna have to bring donuts again, aren't I? Gee whiz. I should have saved them, shouldn't I? So that is what I hope that you guys can get behind this. Like I said, we've worked on it. It's a very very bipartisan. I really think that we've hit where we need to be as far as a good balance between us getting in the middle of these projects, but not slowing them down, so that, because they do happen fast. They do happen faster than a building project. I understand that. So with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Representative. We do have a question. Representative Wolfmore.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Hey, thank you so much for presenting that. I do have a question. So I did check with the Democrats on the committee, as you suggested, and they were fully supportive of this, and it was a bipartisan process. My only question is these, and I haven't even looked at them closely, these amendments that you're suggesting, how did those come about, and are the committee supportive of them? Are they familiar with them?
They should be. Now, they probably aren't familiar with them because it was something that once the bill was written, in talking to the administration and talking to Alan Weiss, it was a couple of things that weren't as much clarified as what we were hoping it would be. So you're welcome to take him to them, and I don't think they'll have a problem with them. And Alan will explain them a little bit more, and hopefully Burns Wallace may too, Secretary Burns Wallace.
Okay.
One of them was simply, so we had a post-audit, I don't remember now how many years ago. It's been a long time ago. We had a post-audit on some of this, and what we found was that the reporting mechanism that is in law that says, right now it says that all of them will report to our legislative CETO, these projects, and then that legislative CETO is supposed to then look at all of them, evaluate them, and then report to JCIT. Well, that's not what is happening because that's not how it's really set up. I mean, it's set up to go to, I mean, 3/4 or probably even 80% of the projects are actually administration projects. They're cabinet agencies and things. So those projects actually go to the administrative CETO, and they're the ones that are, because our legislative CETO doesn't have the manpower to actually do that. Well, we were trying to fix that in statute, make that clear, and we didn't quite get it done. So that's one of the changes in, so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for all your work on this.
Yep.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hoffman, when the JCIT legislation and everything was put into place, the original intent was we have so many different agencies doing computer work, and then find out later we needed, this agency and that agency to be able to communicate, et cetera. So the whole intent is to have someone overview this and make sure that that's some of the things we're doing. Also to give flexibility on buying power, because it may be that another agency is doing a similar project, and sometimes the cost could be reduced. So are we still staying that way, or are we clarifying that better, et cetera? Please explain.
Yeah, actually, I think that the second amendment that I didn't talk about actually clarifies that a little bit more, that makes sure that these projects do have to go through the methodologies of all state agencies and the information technology architect. So that's one of the things. We actually didn't have an architect for a while. We do now, and we're wanting to make sure that, all projects, the architect has a little bit more of an understanding so that it's we do understand what's happening in all the different agencies. And they have done quite a bit of work over the last couple of years in trying to map out our systems and put them in a format where it's understandable where our different systems are, how they're connected, and things like that. So they have been working on that for a couple of years now. And so, hopefully this will clarify it. But one of the things this will do is it will give us the ability to ask those questions before the RFP is put out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions for Representative Hoffman? All right.
Thank you,
seeing
Mr.
none.
Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now go to the next proponent testimony that I have, and that is from Alan Weiss, the Legislative Chief Information Technology Officer. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My written testimony should be in your packet. So I am Alan Weiss, your Legislative Chief Information Technology Officer, And by statute, I staff the Joint Committee on Information Technology. So I have been involved in development of this House Bill 2548 by providing input to the committee when requested. Considering additional risk criteria for the state, I think will add value to the overall evaluation and monitoring of state IT projects. And the risk categories we've been looking at is, other than the monetary costs, which has kind of been the history, is security, operations, architecture, and services. So we would start looking at other risk criteria that Representative Hoffman had alluded to. And enhancing the monitoring of projects by the Joint Committee on IT, I believe, will increase the oversight from the legislature on projects. And I think this helps ensure state funds are used effectively in IT expenditures and projects are completed on time. I believe this is the main intent of these IT statutes that were enacted in 1998. The amendments that were handed out, I assisted Natalie in drafting those, so I can speak to those if the committee desires, and I can also stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Alan. Committee, are there any questions for Alan? All right, see none. Thank you again for your testimony. I'm not showing anybody else in regards to proponent testimony, so if there's anybody else that wishes to testify in favor of House Bill 2548, now is your chance. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the neutral testimony. And we have one individual who wishes to testify in a neutral position for House Bill 2548, and that is Secretary Burns Wallace, the Executive Chief Information Officer. And I believe she is joining us by WebEx. Secretary Burns Wallace?
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Please bear with me this morning. I am home with everything with weather and things like that and children out of school. I would usually be with you this morning, but thank you for allowing me to join through the virtual. You all should have my written testimony on this bill. We did work throughout the interim with the committee on this. For us in particular, the change to the reporting requirements, that 250, I think, as Representative Hoffman kind of pointed out, is something that it has been in statute for a very long time. And at a point in time, I think when it was originally introduced, the idea of that dollar amount really was a designation point of it determined that a project was large and needed to be monitored. The reality of today, as has already been talked about, is that IT projects can come in at many differing costs, and sometimes depending on how the structure of a project is, the initial cost can be actual low, but the number of things that it integrates with, the data that it touches, the systems that it must integrate with or touch can cause or have a larger business risk. And one of the things that we've looked at as we are working towards this risk analysis is business risk, right? And so sometimes we think of IT in a very siloed way of just what happens, with the technology. But as we start to do this risk assessment, it will encapsulate just kind of larger business risks in terms of what happens to the technology, what it touches, how it impacts the continuity of operations for an agency. And so this risk is something that we think is a much better indicator of projects that we need to make sure that we are tracking, know the status of, and that there are precautions and things around. So we are happy to bring that forward as we did last year. As Representative Hoffman mentioned, the bills got rolled together. The other one that we were a part of proposing last year is around the cybersecurity pieces. And it really is a lot of cleanup things that we just need to harden a little bit, make a little bit more clear, and or clean up from when the bill was originally instituted that cybersecurity bill is not that old. A lot of what was written into it was the idea of what was going to happen. We are now a few years in, and we have some understanding of some of the differences and changes, and also places where we think we can tighten it up a bit to make some clarity in that cybersecurity space. So we wanted to have the opportunity to go ahead and clean up some aspects of the bill. The third component of this bill, as was already talked about, is this additional step in the process of reviewing IT projects. I will say that we worked very closely with the committee and with Representative Hoffman to try to find a space where we felt that would provide what JCIT was looking for in this process, but also try to mitigate some of the impact that that can have on delays or impact as that procurement process moves through. And so what you see before you is kind of our best effort to be able to keep both of those considerations in play. I will say that many of our agencies, do have concern just because of the timing of things. And so again, we've been working through that to just be able to see how do we mitigate that and to address both sides of the concerns. With that, I will stand if there are any questions that I can try to answer.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Secretary Burns-Wallace? All right, seeing none, thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. I'm not showing anybody else in regards to neutral testimony for House Bill 2548. So if anybody would like to supply neutral testimony, here's your chance. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move into the opponent testimony in regards to House Bill 2548. And I'm showing that John Hess, the Director of Fiscal Services and Operations for the Kansas State Department of Education. Welcome to committee, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to be back in the building. As I trudged across the snowy tundra that was the State House grounds this morning. The Kansas State Department of Education, of course, wholeheartedly supports efforts to improve and be state's IT infrastructure and to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We have a couple of concerns about this bill, primarily the number of projects that could potentially get of our internal IT projects that could get pulled into this process and slowed down. So the department operates about 150 applications for various purposes, IT applications. This includes like our internal accounting system, an application where school districts request drawdown of federal funds, reporting applications, all sorts of things like that. And the vast majority of these fall well below the current threshold for $250,000. And so we're concerned about that slowing down the process to update something by having to go through this process for a variety of things. So just one example I can speak to in our internal accounting system that we updated over the past summer to help us better be able to track funds. And we were able to do that with our internal project manager, a programmer, and the people on my team being able to update it as needed specifically for the agency. And we were able to do it in a relatively quick and efficient manner. We're concerned that this would create some inefficiencies for our internal IT projects. And those types of things. And so that's generally gist of things. Our IT director is supportive of keeping some kind of dollar threshold in for these types of projects. We understand the goal behind it, but those are kind of our concerns with the bill as it's introduced. I have not had a chance to see the proposed balloon amendments, so I can't speak to those. But Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, John. Committee, are there any questions for John? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, John. It's good to see you again. I'm not sure. I'd have, and I may have to refer to Natalie, but I'm not sure that those projects would actually fit in anyway because you're not putting out a RFP for those, are you?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no, and this might be a case of our testimony was based on how we understood the statute. If this is supposed to be only for projects that go out for RFPs, that we would be significantly less concerned because we only send out RFPs for a select few projects, and usually there tend to be big ones. We were concerned that this would impact all those projects that we do internally as well, that just our own current IT staff do. If it doesn't, the agency's concerns would be significantly less.
Okay, well, we'll try to check on that and talk about that, because I don't think they would, but I may be wrong on that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again, John. We still miss you across the street here. So I guess one of my questions would be, if we kind of put you outside of that loop a little bit, how do we get assurances, et cetera, on the security side of what you're doing with your systems, and that there is some potential communication between some of the other systems that we have?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm less qualified to speak on the details of our IT security. I would note that the last information security audit we had from post-audit had I do not believe they identified any significant issues in IT security. Our IT director is on WebEx, but she emailed me and was having trouble with the Wi-Fi at the Topeka Public Library, where she's currently at for a meeting. So I don't know if our IT director, Kathy Grossenbacher, could speak more to the IT issues, security issues, but we have not had issues like that, and we always try to work to have interoperable systems. We are currently going through an RFP process for a new statewide data system that can work with school districts and stuff like that. So I understand the concerns. I was just trying to bring up the agency's concerns for some of these smaller projects.
Representative Landwehr, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I would just suggest that as we move forward, and it's unfortunate she's not able to work with us here on this today, is that we do due diligence in making sure that we touch base with her before we actually work this bill, so that we're keeping that continuity and the intent of what JCIT was about. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wanting to follow up. So Natalie said what I thought. So the RFP provisions, of course, would not go into affect you unless you're putting out an RFP. What this does, though, is it does put ITEC in charge of those decisions on what is risk. And so depending on their policies that they put forth, some of those projects could, maybe could fall in there, but it would all depend on what their idea, the risks that they put in there would be. So that would be something you'd want to make sure that if this goes forward, that you work with ITEC to make sure that that's, and I'm sure that they will. For those of you that ITEC is, put together by all the agency heads and several people that are on that. We have legislatures on it, and so yeah, that's kind of what Natalie said.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then I would have a question for Representative Hoffman. You say they could work with them, but if it's not actually stated in the bill, or you don't have a proviso or an understanding, would that be effective?
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's specifically ITEC is the one that will be coming up with these risk factors. It's in the bill. And the reason why that was important for me, because I really feel like that right now we have a CETO, we have a Department Administration that is being led and doing some good things. But I don't know who's coming in the future, and so I didn't want the CETO to be the one deciding those factors, because we just don't know. Every 4 years could change. So we wanted to have a little bit of more people involved, and so that's the reason why we put ITEC. they do this all the time, and so gives me a little bit more pause. That was one of the things that it took us a while to get this bill where all of us felt comfortable, and that was one of the reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a little bit uncomfortable because I wasn't sure was it ITEC or CETO, but you've clarified it for me. Thank you very much.
Any further questions for John? All right, seeing none, thank you, John, for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not showing anybody else who has opponent testimony for House Bill 2548, so if there's anybody, right now is your chance to provide that. Seeing none, I am closing the hearing on House Bill 2548. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into our budget report outs. First, we're going to be having the budget reports from Chairman Sutton from the General Government Budget Committee. And if Representative Francis would be in the room, we'd actually have a quorum within the room, so we could actually go ahead and vote these out. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chairman Sutton. And the first, I believe, is going to be the Real Estate Appraisal Board. Chairman Sutton.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. Let's get this ball rolling with some excitement. Not yet. Today, we're going to be looking at the Real Estate Commission, the Real Estate Appraisal Board, and the Kansas Insurance Department. We'll start with the complicated one at the Real Estate Commission. Sarcasm. The agency requests a revised estimate of $1.3 million, all from special revenue funds. It should be noted, by the way, that all three of these committees, or all three of these agencies, certainly the two real estate, are entirely fee-funded. Insurance is mostly fee-funded. So this is an increase of $21,691, or 1.6% above the 22 approved amount. The agency estimate also includes 12 FTE positions, which is an increase of 0.3. What they actually did was take a couple of people who were part-time and make them full-time. We didn't add a third of a person. The governor concurred with the agency's revised estimate. The Budget Committee similarly concurred with the agency request. I can go on to 23 unless there's something burning in your heart to ask me right now.
Go ahead and move on.
All right, very good. For 23, the agency requests a revised estimate of $1.4 million, all from special revenue funds for 23. This request is an increase of $27,630, or 2.1% above the 23 approved amount. The agency requests an enhancement for legal representation by the Attorney General. That's a fee increase from the AG's office that they're putting into their budget. The agency also increased contractual services expenditures by $25,000 for the cost of administering background checks required for the original license application. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation, that was our fingerprint bill. Remember, we had to do fingerprints for real estate agents. This is where it gets passed through the Real Estate Commission budget. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation bills the agency for fingerprinting and criminal history reports. The increases are partially offset by a reduction in travel costs due to Zoom meetings. The governor concurs with the agency's 23 request. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's rec for 23 with the following comments, not suggestions. The Budget Committee comments that the agency should consider relocating into a state-owned building in the future. That's something that we've been looking at on our agencies, particularly with the development of docking, for example, for smaller office space. Some of these agencies could easily be transferred over to those. Just something to look at down the road. I realize that nothing has been done on docking yet, and they still have 5 years left on their lease anyway. So this is just for kind of a highlight to look at down the road. I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Committee, are there any questions for Chairman Sutton? If not, actually, we do have a quorum in the room and also in the building. So if you'd go ahead and make a motion.
Absolutely, I will. I move the Appropriations Committee adopts the House Budget Committee report for the Real Estate Commission, fiscal years 22 and 23.
All right, committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Sutton.
That was Paul Lynn to the secret square right there. The fact that you guys laughed at Paul Lynn means that you're old. All right, Real Estate Appraisal Board. The agency requests a revised estimate of $340,802, all from special revenue funds for 22 expenditures. This is the same as the 22 approved amount. The agency estimate also includes 2.0 FTE positions, which is exactly the same as the approved number. The governor concurs, and so did we. Seeing nothing truly exciting or controversial there, I'll move on to 23. The agency requests a revised estimate of $344,867, all from special revenue funds, for the expenditures of fiscal year 23. This is the same as the 23 approved amount. The agency estimate also includes the same 2 FTE positions, which is the same as the approved number. The governor concurs. So did the Budget Committee, with a couple of recommendations. Again, looking into, in the future, down the road, moving into a state-owned building. The Budget Committee also comments that the rate of decline for the appraiser fee fund balance is of potential concern. That looks like we have about 2 years before they're going to have to start looking at rate increases. The agency isn't concerned about that right now, but I think it's something that we should keep on our radar because the trend line looks kind of disturbing for that fee fund. With that, I'll stand for questions.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Chairman Sutton? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You brought up now these 2 smaller agencies looking at possibly moving when their leases are up. History lesson, I mean, were they in the docking building before that all, why are they kind of off campus, if you will?
They're not terribly off campus. They're in Jayhawk Towers right now, where there are a lot of small office agencies.
But that happened because docking had larger agencies. Have they been there for quite?
I think they've been there for a spell. I just would like to look into consolidation if at all possible.
Fair enough.
Any other further questions for Chairman Sutton? All right, seeing none, Chairman Sutton, you may make a motion.
I move the House Budget Committee report for the Real Estate Appraisal Board for fiscal years 22 and 23.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Nope.
Second by Representative Johnson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Sutton.
Very good. Let's get on to the Kansas Insurance Department. The agency requests a revised estimate of $37.5 million, all from all funds for expenditures in 22. This is an increase of $2.8 million, or 7.9% above the 22 approved amount. There are increased expenditures in all major categories of expenditure, including salaries and wages, contractual services, commodities, and capital outlay. This amount includes a federal grant award of total of $675,000 that was received, again, from the feds, from the State Flexibility to Stabilize the Market Cycle 2 grant. That's going to be split over the years of 22 and 23, so you'll see an influx of $330,000 and change per year from that. The governor concurs with the 22 estimate, and the Budget Committee similarly concurred. And I can move on.
I say I'm not seeing any questions. Go ahead and proceed.
All right, very good. For fiscal year '23, the agency requests expenditures of $37.1 million from all funds. This is a decrease of $438,000 below the '22 revised estimate. The decrease is primarily due to expenditures on contractual services for training, accountants, and auditors. This amount includes a federal grant, the same federal grant award, the $335 and change. The agency also requests 135.5 FTEs, which is the same as the 22 the 22 revised estimate. The governor concurred. The House Budget Committee concurred with a couple of comments. The Budget Committee comments that attention should be paid to the increasing balance of the Insurance Department Service Regulation Fund to guard against the agency overcharging businesses and individuals who operate in Kansas. Now, currently, let me just kind of explain this one a little bit ahead of time. There is a good reason for that fee fund to be going up right now. We passed SB 37 last year, changed some of the licensing requirements and timings. They're not quite certain what the impact on the fee fund is going to be, so they don't want to make any drastic changes right now until that impact is able to be measured. So that's where we are right now. The agency is very aware that that fee fund is climbing ridiculously. There's no chance of sweeps from the insurance department, and I've got the lawsuits to prove it. But, I'm sorry, past history joke there. But nonetheless, we don't want to be overcharging the insurance providers and agents here in the state. They're aware of that. We're just looking to see what the impact of 37 will be. The Budget Committee also comments that increased expenditures for salaries and wages, along with increased expenditures for professional services, is of concern. What we saw in the budget is that we increased the budgeted amount for contractual services because we couldn't have the people in-house. What were some of the categories? So some of the more analytic fiscal policy folks that are a little hard to hire. They increased the amount of their budget to hire those folks, but wanted to keep the contractual services budget higher just in case they're not able to. So net result is that we're going to see an increase in one or the other, but probably not both. There are a couple of different philosophies at work here as far as budget reporting. I would personally argue that the fungibility would allow you to transfer from salaries and wages to contractual services so that you wouldn't have to increase both. But this isn't an acceptable policy to raise the threshold for both and then clean it up on the back end as to where the numbers actually come in. I'll stand for questions.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Sutton. Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Enjoyed your report. I am not that knowledgeable about this, so if this is a strange question, I'm sorry. What budget or account does claim payments come out of?
Well, I think it would kind of depend on the claim, what they were claiming against.
All right, the reason
We're talking about workman's comp, for example?
Yeah, maybe workman's comp. That's what, I guess when I'm not sure, when we say the Department Service Regulation Fund,
Okay.
specifically, what is that fund for? I was just wondering, was it payout claims or how do that work?
The service let me find it here, 1 second, I have it right here. I might have it right here. All right, Martin, I'm not able to locate it. Can I phone a friend here?
Mr. Chairman, I don't really need to know.
I say Amy has indicated that it's on page 4 of the document for the budget analysis.
Well, then I must have scrolled right past it.
Page 4.
Right.
The fund receives fees charged by the department, 1% of premium taxes from insurance companies, and an annual assessment is imposed as deemed necessary by the commissioner. What do they spend it on, however? Well, $200,000 of it goes to assist in the funding of the Fraud and Abuse Criminal Prosecution Fund, and that was from the AG's office. Where does the other money go? Yep, I have that down. That's exactly. We did talk about that. Holy cow. Okay, that would go to, like, say, for example, there was a claim against an insurance company that is no longer doing business in Kansas. We did have a discussion on this. I can't believe that I was blanking it out of my mind. Somebody has to pay, and that would come to the insurance department. And that's part of the problem. You see the line's a little bit jagged there. It's because there's really no way of predicting when an insurance company is going to have a claim that no longer, for a company that no longer exists. So they try to keep money in there, but they can't predict when it'll be spent or where it'll go.
Okay, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's what I was wondering by looking at it. But the title doesn't tell you what it is. But when you say against agency overcharging, well, part of that is you got to keep a substantial amount there just in case it does happen. And then the other part was, at which point is there a ceiling that says when it gets this high, we have to do something else about it? That's why I was asking.
That's exactly right. And as you look on page 5 there, you can see that we've gotten to the point now where the fee fund balance is approximately 10 times what they would normally pay out and double the maximum year that we've run into in the past. So this fee fund is growing. We need to, I think, keep an eye on it. The agency's well aware of it too. They want to do the same thing, but we want to make sure that the impact of some of our legislation doesn't hinder it in itself.
Well, that makes sense to me, because if you have an extraordinary year where you maybe double your claims and you're less the next year and you don't have money, what do you do?
Exactly.
Thank you.
We call a special session and appropriate more money.
Good job, Mr. Sutton. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, any further questions for Chairman Sutton? All right, seeing none, Chairman Sutton.
I would move the Budget Committee report for fiscal years 22 and 23 for the Kansas Insurance Department.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Ballard. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion passes. All right, thank you, Chairman Sutton. We'll go ahead and
thank you, Mr. Chair.
We are going to probably recess at 11 for those of us that need to be on the floor for bill introductions. So I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Francis from the Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committee. Chairman Francis, please indicate which budget you're going to be starting with.
It actually works. Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start out with the Abstractors Board of Examiners. So the Abstractor Board of examines licenses and regulates companies and their employees that sell abstracts of land titles to Kansas real estate. For fiscal year 2022, the agency estimates revised operating expenditures of $25,716, all from the Abstractors Fee Fund. In fiscal year 2022, it's the same amount as was approved by the 2021 legislature. The governor concurred with the agency's revised estimate, and the Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2022. If there's no questions, I'll move on to 2023.
Go ahead.
For 2023, it's much the same. The agency estimates revised operating expenditures of $25,717, again from the fee fund for fiscal year 2023, and that's the same amount as approved by the 2021 legislature. The governor concurred with the agency's revised estimate, and the budget committee concurred with the governor's recommendations for fiscal year 2023.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Chairman Francis? All right, seeing none, we do not have a quorum in the room, so we cannot go ahead with a motion, but we are going to go ahead and recess until 11:30 this morning when we are done with session, and then we'll resume with the discussions for the other two budgets that you have in your committee. So committee, we are in recess until 11:30. resume the discussion that we were having prior to legislative session at 11. So I'll turn it back over to Representative or Chairman Francis, and please tell us which budget you're going to be starting with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's move on to the Board of Technical Professions. So the Board of Technical Professions, they are kind of in charge of overseeing the practices of engineering, architecture, land surveying, landscape, architecture, and geology to make sure that they're qualified as prescribed by the statutes and the board's rules and regulations. This agency for 2022 estimated that their revised operating expenditures of $786,172 in fiscal year 2022, all from the Technical Professions Fee Fund. That's the same amount as was approved by the 2021 legislature. The agency increased its estimate for membership dues and subscriptions by $5,000. That reflects the subscription fees for national associations of the 5 disciplines that they regulate. The agency increased its estimate for attorney fees by $5,000 per contract with the Attorney General's office. And the agency decreased its estimate for salaries and wages by $2,024 due to reduced fringe benefit costs. The agency also decreased its estimate for computer equipment and programming by $13,000. The agency used to provide testing equipment software for the geology license exam, but the vendors now provide these to the applicants directly. And the agency also increased its estimate for the state building capital charge by $6,000. We have no idea. We talked to them directly. They said that's a number that's passed on to them from the Department of Administration. So with that, I'd stand for questions on fiscal year 2022, or I can proceed on to 2023.
Well, obviously, you read the facial expression on my face when we were talking about the monumental building surcharge, but there's no, that's just what's passed on from DOA.
Right.
Right. Any other questions on 22? If not, you may move on to 2023.
Okay, the agency requests operating expenditures of $792.91, again from the Technical Professions Fee Fund for fiscal year 2023, and this is a fee-funded agency. There's no state general fund dollars in this. That's the same amount that was approved by the legislature for fiscal year 2023. Again, the increases are due to the $5,000 for its membership dues and subscriptions for the 5 disciplines that it regulates. Again, there's the $5,000 increase from the Attorney General's office. And again, a decrease in its estimate for computer equipment and programming by $13,000. The agency used to provide testing equipment and softwares again for the geology license exam, but the vendors now provide these to the applicants directly. There's also, again, the state building capital charge of $6,000 increase. Probably the biggest thing that happened on this agency that doesn't show up in this summary is they've traditionally had 5 employees. One of the employees they were unable to fill, so they got permission from the Department of Administration to divide up a portion of that person's salary and gave the rest of it, or gave part of it back and divvied up part of it among the 4 remaining employees. So with that, I would stand for questions on 2023.
Any questions? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got no argument with divvying up the one employee's salary amongst the other employees. Are they also looking to fill that position again in the future?
They want to leave it open in case they can't handle the duties, but at this time they think they'll be able to handle the duties. The salary that was of the person that left was $35,360 of salary, $15,666 of benefits, so total of about $51,000. They divvied up about $27,000 of it, and they've got the other $24,000 in their salary reserves.
All right, I'm seeing an increase of $160,000. I'm looking at where from actual 21 to 22. And I don't see it going down in '23.
Well, the 622,000 is what they actual spent.
Right.
You know, they always have a little bit of extra money. I think this agency has extra money in there because sometimes they have litigation with some of their people that they license, and so they have some extra money in there for that. Some of it could also be salaries. You know, I know that about 24,000 of it is in salaries.
Right. Out of 160,000 with 5 employees, I doubt it's all salary.
Right.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
All right, committee, any further questions? Seeing none, you may move on to the next budget.
Next budget is going to be the Emergency Medical Services Board. This agency promotes emergency medical services through consistent application of laws to provide support of ambulance services, EMS professionals, and EMS educational organizations. And it helps them with their licensing and their education and maintain standards. So in fiscal year 2022, the agency requests a revised estimate of $2.6 million all from special revenue funds. This is an increase of $81,641 or 3.2% above the approved amount. There's an increase of expenditures and salaries and wages of $5,766 or 0.6%. There's an increase of contractual services of $3,789. And then there's an increase in aid to local units of $79,311 or 11.6%. So the reason you're seeing that is when they get the funding for this from court fees, and when the courts were shut down, their funding in that area dropped, and then this is reflecting an increase in the funds that they'll have available to hand out for their grant program. So it seems like a big amount, but it's more a reflection of what the cash flow is there. There were no changes to the 14 FTE positions. And again, it talks about the significant increase in aid to local units, includes the EMS revolving grant, which had a slight increase in fiscal year 2022. The governor concurred with the agency's revised estimate. We concurred with the governor's recommendation with the following notation. As many of you that are budget chairs know, Chairman Weimaster has wanted us to reach out to our agencies and encourage them to access spark funds for things that can improve the welfare of our constituents across the state and also make government more efficient. This department head did a great job of doing that. One of the things that came to my attention from a constituent of a neighboring district was that our EMS agencies, particularly the volunteer ones, are having a really hard time recruiting and retaining volunteers for EMS, as we're seeing across the state. You know, it's getting harder to man volunteer deals. So the Emergency Medical Service Board came up with 3 proposals for the spark process. What I asked them to do was to list these as so that we could show our support for these 3 proposals. One of them is to increase is $1 million for educational incentive grants to support recruitment and retention of EMS providers. Another of them is $1 million for the EMS revolving grant fund to provide financial assistance to Kansas EMS agencies and organizations. It's going to help them get ventilators on their trucks, cardiac arrest equipment, and gurneys for their trucks. And then the last one is to, this is a program that has been very successful in Montana. And what it is, it's a mobile classroom so that they can go around the state and help hospitals and EMS providers to work better together. They have this big truck, and it goes out there, and part of it is remodeled to be an emergency room. Part of it is remodeled to be an actual home. And so everybody can work together to see what we have to do to get the individual out of the home, and then what needs to take place when they get to the emergency room. There was a fourth item that they included that they were concerned that it met the needs of, or that it met the requirements, excuse me, of the Spark process. I'll just mention it so that you'll know what we didn't do. It was $2 million to develop a virtual reality training and licensing program so that they could do some of their training and some of their licensing with virtual reality. I'm not involved in the process too much, but that was, they felt like it didn't really quite fit the need. I thought it maybe did a little bit better than some of these, but anyway. So funding of these projects was not included in the governor's recommendation in fiscal year 2022, but we want to be on record, our subcommittee, of supporting these three requests. And I would hope the Appropriations Committee would consider doing something similar to that. So with that, I'll stand for questions on 2022.
All right, so on these three items that the Budget Committee has basically referred them to the Spark process or through the advisory panels, do you know, are they anticipating to submit a request form?
They already have.
They already have?
Yeah, and should I also submit the same request so that they have the same request from two different entities?
No, I don't think there's any need for you to submit. If they've already submitted it, it's going to already be in the queue, so there's not a necessary for another application to be sent.
Okay.
And they are aware that these are one-time money.
Yes.
Because I'm not seeing it in the 2023 budget.
Right.
So I just want to make sure, especially with items 1 and 2. Obviously, number 3 is the purchasing of 2 trucks. So that basically correlates to one-time spend. But 1 and 2, I just want to make sure that they don't come back in subsequent years and say, we want to keep this grant program going. But they're under the understanding that this is one-time money through the Spark process.
I tried to make it very clear. Now, they did try to, my understanding was that the funds had to be spent by, is it 2024?
In some aspects, yes, the ARPA funds have to be spent by 2024. Some actually do parlay into 2025.
So I tried to encourage them to make a request that they thought would cover a 2-year period, again, to help them get back on their feet. You know, a lot of people didn't want to, there was some resistance by some people to be an EMT, honestly, because of concerns with COVID and everything else. So, yeah, I told them one-time money.
Committee, any questions in regards to 2022? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is important. I know sometimes we look at dollars and anything that is in the green side we get a little leery of, but these additions in one time, you know, I work fairly closely with at least one. In fact, I office pretty close to my home county's director, and the challenges that has been, our small county had well over 100 first responders at one time. That number was down, but I'll tell you, the days of the fires, the wind, the derecho, every one of our volunteers, from firemen to our police officers, of course, they're not volunteer, but all our first responders, everybody was out, was deployed. And you know what? They didn't ask for anything. They didn't ask for anything. And so I think that's, you know, sometimes we get very territorial from east to west and rural to urban, but that is anything we can do to encourage our local, you know, emergency managers, emergency medical situation, because that is the first line of defense. And so I would strongly encourage and support this in a strong way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, looking at from actual 21 to fiscal 22, am I reading this correctly that all of the 14 FTEs got a 12%, 13% raise?
Where do you see that
I
represented?
see salaries and wages go from 844 to 964, but we're holding the FTE position solid at 14.
Are you on page 7, is that right?
I'm on page 3 right now of this handout. I don't have
So
the-
what that actually reflects is they've got one amount that they budget. They've got another amount that they actually spend. So, 2021 is actual expenditures. You'll see if you go to page 7, I believe it's page 7, you'll see that there are increases of expenditures in all categories, including the largest increase of $120,000. I talked to the director specifically about that. And what's going on there is they did have one vacant position, and it was basically they're a policy analyst that is an epidemiologist. They filled that position. That's $60,000 plus benefits, but $60,000 is around the base pay. But then, excuse me, this is a very large board. It's got 15 board members. They normally meet 6 times a year, and then they have 18 days. Their meetings are 3 days at a time, and so it also reflects, they've been doing those by Zoom, and so it reflects an increase in salaries because their boards, they expect to meet again this year. If we also go to page, I got to find it, page 2, you can see that there was an increase of $45,930 in their contractual services.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
And anyway, that's because of increased rent and increased legal fees due to, they're going to increase their hearings. I don't know if there's any overlap with that with the salaries, but, it's kind of, some of this is a ramp up back from COVID when they were staying home and Zooming a lot.
Okay. Now, contractual services shouldn't interfere with salaries and wages. There shouldn't be any bleed over in between those two. But I see what you're saying nonetheless. All right. Now, the increased aid to locals, is that what you were talking about because of the increased hearings?
No. The increased aid to locals is they've got a grant fund that they help. They already have one grant fund that they help small departments replace equipment. And that increase there is because the courts have opened up again, and part of the funding mechanism for that is a fee on certain court cases.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions for Chairman Francis? All right, seeing none, actually, I believe in the room and also those individuals on web. Yes?
My hand is up. I had a
Representative
question.
Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Shannon, do you have in your current memory the per diem for board members on that board?
I'm sorry, Representative, I do not know. I know 4 of them are legislators, so I know their amount would be what we get for attending meetings. But I don't know what the others get.
Did I hear you say they were increased this year in their per diem or not? I just kind of didn't catch that.
No, Representative. They've been meeting by Zoom.
Right.
And they anticipate this year to resume their in-person meetings. And that's what part of that increase reflects.
Okay, thank you. We've been having a discussion in one of my agencies about per diem, and I think that there may be a need to review board member per diems, and so I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, any further questions for Chairman Francis? All right, seeing none, we actually do have enough in the room and also those individuals on WebEx.
Did I do 2023 or did I stop at 2022?
I think, did you do 2023?
I don't think I did 2023
No? All right.
yet.
Then move on to 2023.
But I am getting in that Alzheimer's age, so I mean, and I got a little bit of that deer in the headlights.
Apparently I am too,
Sutton is eyeing me.
Proceed to 2023.
Okay. So for fiscal year 2023, the agency requested $2.6 million off from special revenue funds. This is a decrease of $12,512 or 0.5% below the fiscal year 2022 revised estimate. There are increases of expenditures in all categories, including $45,930 in contractual services and $16,953 in capital outlay. There's a decrease in aid to local units of $79,311, or 10.4%. This amount reappropriated in fiscal year 2022. There were no changes to the 14 FTE positions. The increase in contractual services includes increased rent and increased legal fees due to anticipated increased hearings. The increase in capital outlay is for replacement of computer equipment. The governor concurred with the agency's request for fiscal year 2023, and the Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2023 also. And with that.
Committee, any questions in regards to fiscal year 2023? All right, seeing none. Actually, if you would go back to the Abstractors Board of Examiners and make a motion on that,
Okay.
since we do have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee recommendations for the Abstractors Board of Examiners for budget for fiscal years 20 and 23 be approved.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Sutton. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next, the Board of Technical Professions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee recommendations for the Board of Technical Professions budget for fiscal years 2022 and 2023 be approved.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Second by Representative Ballard. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And finally, the Emergency Medical Services Board. Chairman Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Emergency Medical Services Board budget for fiscal years 2022 and 23 be approved.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, thank you, Chairman Francis.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I was just told that the per diem for the non-legislative members is $35 as far as pay. I'm sure there's also some travel expenses that are included in that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Since we do have enough members, we'll go back to the item that we kind of skipped over earlier this morning in regards to approving the minutes for the January 25th and 26th meetings. You should have received those through email. Were there any changes to those meeting minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion. The motion has been made by Representative Hoffman, a second by Representative Wolfmore. All those in favor of approving the minutes for January 25th and 26th, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Also this morning, when we had the Children's Cabinet with Executive Director Melissa Rucker, you should have received 3 different documents at your place setting today. And those are the historical numbers, basically from the year 2000 to fiscal year 2023. And so you should have those as reference and how the Children's Cabinet has been funded for basically the last 20 years. We will be not having a meeting tomorrow. And so tomorrow we will not be reconvening, but we will be having a meeting on Monday morning at 9 a.m. So if there's nothing else, we are adjourned until Monday morning at 9.